A proud affiliate of the Odd Pod Media Network. This is Nick.
Are you going commando with no headphones?
I'm going commando with no headphones right now, and it feels super awkward and uncomfortable, actually.
Why don't you throw those bad boys on?
I feel so weird, but I'm going to make it work.
All right, do it.
It's just super uncomfortable. But anyways, this is a special episode today, right?
It is. A very special episode.
A very special episode. Why? Why is it so special?
Because we get to talk with Quark.
We get to talk with Quark. Wait, Quark?
Quark.
Quark. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. Quark isn't real.
No, Quark's real. He's real if you believe it.
Oh, is it like... Oh, that's wonderful. Anyways.
I wonder if there are any listeners we have that still believe in Santa Claus.
Well, they don't now. You just ruined it for them.
Well, I believe in Santa Claus.
Well, Santa Claus is in here. Which is our hearts. They don't see that. But...
I believe in Quark.
I was going to ask. I was just about to ask, is Rob on this episode?
I was wondering where he was. But anyways, hey, what's so special about today? What's so special about our episode today, Rob?
Didn't I just tell you?
You said Quark. You said Quark, but there's something more special about it.
It's Monday night.
No, you're both getting it wrong.
Armin Shimerman?
Armin Shimerman.
Yes, I realize he was much more than Quark.
Yes.
But the vast listening audience that we have will recognize him as Quark. But as you'll hear in the upcoming interview, he is much more than just known for Star Trek. He is a man of the theater. He's a man of Shakespeare. He's a very well-read, well-researched man. And I'd say I learned a lot listening.
Oh my goodness, yes.
I'm not a scholar. I'm an idiot. I'm some dumb bastard with a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But he kind of inspired me to kind of give Shakespeare a second chance. Like, go back and find, because he gave us notes on what to.
Yeah.
That was a good question you asked. You'll hear it.
Thought of that on the fly. Thank you.
Where would you?
The 12th night.
Yeah.
Right?
Where would you kind of start somebody off if they were just new? And the answer he gave is one that I wrote down, and I'm going to go back and either find whatever source material there is for that.
Yeah, I'm going to give that a look. It's called 12th Night. That's what it is.
Okay, so I wrote down 12th Night. I wrote down 12th Night with an N-I-G-H-T and then K-N-I-G-H-T. Which one is it?
It's 12th. T-W-E-L-F-T-H. Night.
Oh yeah, well
that's what it is.
Because it was written so goddamn long ago. It was before they had numbers.
Also known as "Or What You Will." That's all. It's also known from.
Yeah, so long ago they didn't have numbers back then, so they had to spell it out.
Yeah, exactly. Those numbers weren't invented yet.
Right.
Yeah, that's a recent addition to the world.
So you can spell that whole word with two numbers.
And guess what? The setting of 12th Night is Illyria.
Oh, look at that.
It comes full circle.
It comes full circle back to, it's a ancient region of the West. Anyways, no one cares about that stuff.
Well,
I mean, they do.
Nicholas.
They do. But I mean, they don't care about us talking about it. They care about Armin talking about it.
Our audience doesn't care about us talking about anything we ever talk about.
Exactly, nor do I.
Well, there's hard evidence for that.
There is hard evidence for that. Is it 20 time?
No, we're gonna skip 20
No,
time.
we're going straight to our interview today. So anything else we want to say before we lead in this interview?
Happy Thanksgiving. Belated.
This is after Thanksgiving.
I said belated, man.
Belated. We hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving, a safe gathering with your friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully everybody stayed safe.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't eat too much. I plan on. I can say this. Even I can't time travel, but I can tell you right now that I ate too much. I can tell you as of this recording, the Monday before Thanksgiving, that I have already eaten too much.
Oh, I've already eaten too much as well. I've already eaten too much. So with that said, we're gonna unbutton our pants because we want to let our bellies fill out.
Oh, that's why?
My pants are always unbuttoned.
Yeah, that's true. And we're gonna let you listen to this interview with Armin, and we're really excited about it. We hope you enjoy it. So we'll be back. Well, everyone, we are here with Armin, and we're very excited to sit down and talk with him. And we have plenty we want to talk about, ranging from Shakespeare all the way to some guest spots that he's had to talking about a character that we obviously love very much because we have a podcast about it on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Quark. So thank you again, Armin, for being here. We really appreciate you taking this time.
Pleasure.
Yes. So, I mean, with that said, we want to just go ahead and dive right into it. Gentlemen, which one of you wants to go ahead and take the lead here today?
I say you start, Mr. Nick.
All right. Well,
Go
I'll
ahead.
start the lead. Well, so I'm going to start, and I'm going to go really deep here. And I want to actually start by talking with you about your career with Shakespeare and your teaching career with Shakespeare. I find that absolutely fascinating, especially in an era where it seems like there are many people who have devalued his works, especially in the public education system. So I was curious, what would you tell people who feel that Shakespeare isn't applicable in their life and it's not important works that they would really need to read or learn about?
Well, I would say to them they were wrong, first off.
Well, of course.
Second, I would say the reason you have a problem with Shakespeare, the reason that Shakespeare seems so distant to you, is that most of the teachers who teach it, certainly in the public schools, don't know what they're teaching. They don't know how to approach it, and because they don't know how to approach it, the students don't get any value out of it. If you're looking at Shakespeare through the prism of the 21st century, then you're going to have a great problem. You have to approach Shakespeare through the prism of the 16th century, and understand their world. And what's great about investigating Shakespeare from that point of view is it's like a time machine. You can go back in time and experience what the world was like prior to our times when things were radically different. That is the great thrill for me, is to go back in time and be part of a world that no longer exists. It's right out of Star Trek.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So I'm a pastor. I work in the Methodist Church, and a lot of the times with biblical texts, that's what I tell people as well. I really tell them, look, we cannot read this in the lens of the 21st century. You have to put yourself in the shoes of those authors at that point in time. And once you do that, the text will really pop and you'll connect with it in a way you haven't before. So I really I understand exactly what you're saying about Shakespeare, especially for me. When I grew up, I found Shakespeare very hard to approach for that very reason. I was trying to read it as if Shakespeare was here today.
Yeah,
And that's a big
it doesn't
mistake.
necessarily work that way.
Right. There's also just a reading problem in the sense that you are reading it in the way you were taught to read, and that's how else would you do that? However, what I teach and what makes my students ahead of the game as far as their approach to Shakespeare is that I teach them to read Shakespeare in the way that Shakespeare was taught to write. In other words, there is a connection there's a technique about putting words together in order to make them memorable and to make an argument. And that's called rhetoric. And if you don't teach rhetoric with Shakespeare, then it's a little like trying to read a Latin text when you have no Latin. You may pick up some cognates, you may pick up some words that are familiar, but you won't really understand the Latin. If you understand how Shakespeare put the words together, and the words aren't that different. People are saying, "Oh, that's Old English." I don't understand it. It's not Old English. It's modern English. It's that you are looking at the text through the prism of the 21st century reader, and if you start looking for why Shakespeare wrote it the way he wrote it, the text will become enormously clear. Enormously clear. I'm sorry for that phone call and my dog at the same time.
Pretend it's me.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. That's again very similar to a lot of the works that I do within the church with biblical reading.
Well, the King James Bible and Shakespeare are only about 8 years apart.
Yeah,
So yes, the King James Bible anyway is written. The original text was, of course, in Greek and Hebrew in the Bible, and so we have translators. We have people translating from those original texts into English, and of course, the translation of the Bible was one of the huge, enormous difficulties of Shakespeare's time. People died over the translation of the Bible.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's and it just makes me think of the way certain authors in the Bible wrote their works. Paul wrote his work with a certain rhetoric where it was meant to be confrontational, and people read that now and they're like, "Ooh, Paul was kind of a jerk." And the reality is, Paul wrote that way because that's what the readers expected to understand. That's how they expected to interpret that reading. They wanted it that way.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Again, looking through the prism of the writer and not through the prism of the reader.
Yeah, exactly.
And if I remember correctly, Shakespeare was it wasn't really meant to be read, was it? It was mostly...
Never meant to be read. Absolutely right. It was never, ever meant to be read. It was only, in fact, he died before any words were printed. Well, I take that back. Words were printed, but he didn't okay them. And he didn't okay the first folio either, for that matter. But it were only meant to be spoken, and that too helps with the understanding of Shakespeare if you don't read it, but if you listen to a trained actor doing it, it will be much clearer than when you're reading it on the page. Because it's not just about words, it's also about sound.
Yeah.
And the sound goes with the meaning of the words. Shakespeare was very clever, as most poets are, about making the sound and the meaning jive together. And language is what we did so much of in Star Trek. Language, it was not just about space, it was about the way we spoke, the way we approached things, and the way the writers put language together. So that is why most of the actors on Star Trek had a classical background, because we could handle the language.
Well, and you can tell the difference, and this isn't a knock against any of the other series. They're all fantastic in their own rights, but you can tell there is more of that classically trained actor and actress within Deep Space Nine, because the way they just carry the screen when they're on it, the gravitas of them on the screen, the way they speak, the way they carry themselves, it's different from the other series.
Well, I don't know much about the actors on the other series, especially the new ones. The older ones I do, but not the newer ones. But certainly on our show, almost all of us, except possibly Terry, all of us were theater actors. We were trained, and so that what you call gravitas, we would call presence. And that presence is there because we learned it being on the stage.
Absolutely.
And you can tell that with just the background stuff, like the stuff that Rene Auberjonois used to do.
Close, not well, sort of close. Okay, auberginois.
My apologies. But the stuff he used to do in the background, like the stirring of the pot that you would see in some of the scenes, it was just, you could tell that there's theater background there.
Absolutely.
Rene is, whether he's gone or not, he still is a prince of the theater. He was one of the most sought after Shakespeare. Excuse me. He was one of the most sought after theater actors in our country. An enormous presence in the stage.
Well, and when we spoke with Nana a couple months ago, she spoke just so glowingly about her time with Rene as well, and every scene she was in with him was just an experience. She said it was like almost an out-of-body experience when you're in scenes with him. You were in that scene, you were in that moment. You weren't acting, you were that character, especially around Rene.
Well, I would say that for all the actors on our show, whether they were the series regulars or the recurring characters, we delved very deeply into our characters. We tried to be them. And as we got to know the other characters better and better, we had background that we could use for our performances. As you may or may not know, one of the things I instigated on the show, because of the makeup and because of the large with the Ferengi, but we broached out to other actors as well, that I would call rehearsals on the weekends, which never happens. And I would bring the actors together to my house, and we would rehearse the scenes so that we really got as deep into our characters as we possibly could, understanding that when you're shooting a scene, you have maybe a half an hour to get ready for a scene, whereas on the weekends we would spend hours looking at the materials and discussing it and taking it apart, putting it back together, looking at it through a different prism, just trying to figure out how to make this as lifelike and as personal as possible.
And I think that's one of the one of the crowning achievements of DS9 was not only the ensemble main cast and even the B characters, but the one-off characters, or the characters where they might have only been in maybe a handful of episodes, 2 or 3, that were cast perfectly for the role that they had. And I haven't seen anything like that in any of the other series. I mean, I haven't seen an episode of DS9 where I felt like they miscast any role, and that's
Well, you have to thank Junie Lowry, our casting director, for that, and our producers and our directors for the casting sessions. But I would agree with you. I never worked with an actor that I was unhappy with.
that's pretty amazing
That is
for
pretty
almost
amazing.
180 episodes of beloved show.
Right. Now, granted, I tended to have my own story, my own little world. So the actors that populated my world were recurring characters, and they were wonderful. But when I broached out, like for instance, Mary Kay Adams in House of Quark, she was wonderful, terrific. A lot of the actors that I worked with were terrific. But as I said, we came up to speed because we did some extra rehearsal.
That's great. What was your inspiration for becoming a teacher, a professor?
Thank you for that question. My degree out of college was in English, and I've always been fascinated with Shakespeare. Shakespeare was my primary study in college, and I there was an interim period between my theater career in New York and my TV career in Los Angeles when nothing much was happening. And one of my friends who runs a theater in Los Angeles asked me if I would teach a course in Shakespeare, which she knew I was familiar with. And I did, and I really enjoyed it a great deal. And so it became, at that time, in the interim time, it was the way I made money, was able to pay the rent. But but I really grew to like it a great deal. And I came to find that what I had to teach was unique and different than most Shakespeare teachers teach. As I said, I teach through the prism of rhetoric. And most people had never experienced rhetoric before. They only knew that it was the Rosetta Stone for understanding classical materials.
Yeah.
And because I saw people get better very quickly, because I saw people understand things they had never understood before, literally, I've had thousands of people said after my first class, they've gotten more in one class than they've gotten in 4 years of college. So I knew I was good at it. I knew I had something to say, and I like doing it. And so I still do it. And that first job I still have after 25, 30 years. I still teach twice a year for them, and it's a great satisfaction to me. And it's helped. I continued 2 years ago before COVID set in. I was at a Shakespeare festival in Utah, and I still perform Shakespeare when I can. When the COVID hit, I was directing Measure for Measure, a Shakespearean play at the theater that I helped run, and so Shakespeare's always been part of my life, and certainly it's the impetus for the books that I've written as well.
Yeah, well, and I do have some questions about your books, but one of the questions that just sprung to my mind about your love for Shakespeare is: was there an educator or someone in your past that helped spur that love, or did you kind of craft that love on your own?
Thank you, Nick. There was at least two educators. I'll start with my college professor, David Rhodes, who was dedicated to in the book. He gave me a great love for Shakespeare and began to show me how to appreciate it the way I should appreciate it. So that's one. Two, I had an acting teacher. Her name is Ada Mather, and she was able to take what my college teacher was telling me about the themes and the ideas and the language and change them. I'm very busy today, very positive. And change them into acting techniques. So between the intellectual and the emotional, I was able to marry together a technique, and they both inspired me. Without those two teachers, I don't think I would have gotten halfway as far as I have with Shakespeare.
Thank you.
But there isn't a day goes by that I don't do some research, not necessarily into Shakespeare. Shakespeare was the beginning, but into that period. I teach acting and Shakespeare, but I also include the history, the religion, the ethics of that period. And without that, I don't think you have a full grasp of what the plays are about or what people were writing about. Forget about the plays, because there were a lot of writers in Elizabethan times, in the Tudor times, that had, that weren't Shakespeare.
Well, one of my biggest questions is related to your book, and forgive me if I mispronounce it wrong. I am the king of mispronouncing books. I assumed it's Illyria. Is that correct?
That is correct. Absolutely correct.
Right.
Illyria.
Nick finally got something
gets
right.
a pronunciation right.
Congratulations. I just gave you an A in my course. Okay.
Oh, hey.
I'll take it. But one of the things is, so I'm currently reading it right now. Don't spoil it for me, because I'm enjoying my reading right now. But one of the things that I find so fascinating about it is your way of really putting us into the 16th century. I really, as I'm reading the book, like, I can vividly picture all these images around me, and I can picture the emotions and the feelings. So I was a history major when I was in college, so I really gravitate towards those sorts of things. So my question for you was, was this a passion of yours leading into it, or did you find you had to do a lot of historical research to write your novel?
That's both, Nick, both.
Okay.
I certainly, it was a passion of mine, as I've been explaining to you, and you can hear it in my voice.
Yes.
And two, I had to do a lot of research as well. But the research is delicious.
Yeah.
And so I ate it up, and it gets processed in my mind, and it hopefully comes out correct on the page. You can't see it, but over to my right, there's a huge bookcase of reference books about the history of that period. As I said, I am. It's a long time since college. I would say 50 years, and I think every day between then and now, I've done some research about the period.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that.
So would you say that is the historical period you gravitate more towards if you're doing historical research, just even on your own for fun? Is that
yes, for fun? It is my go-to period for fun. When I'm doing a play that revolves around a different period, then of course I'm doing research about that period as well. But it is my, in quote, fun period.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of people out there who wouldn't call that as fun, but I do.
Fun, historical research as fun.
It is.
You heard
it
here first.
I enjoy it.
It is for me, and I recommend it to anyone who wants something else to do, especially during these days when you can't go outside as often as you'd like. Find something that you really want to do. Find something, whether it's research in historical periods, whether it's cooking, whether it's finding out about astrophysics, whatever it is. Find out something else. It'll make the days go quicker and better, more enjoyable.
Right, and for me too, history so much informs who we are as a people, and I think about who we are during this era of COVID and the trauma it's caused so many of us. And if you go back and read some historical literature from the era of the plagues that existed, you can read that in their work as well. The trauma comes through in that work. And if people had done more research on that era, they would understand a lot more of the feelings that they have today.
That era is more relatable than they probably think.
Than they realize, right?
Humanity has faced plagues throughout the existence of humanity. There's always been a plague of some sort. And right, people have faced it and they've gotten through it. A lot of people have died along the way. That's unfortunate. But it is not something new, and it is something we have to learn to cope with, just as the Romans did, just as the Elizabethans did, just as the people in the 18th century had to do.
I've been hogging the mic, gentlemen.
Yes, you have.
Yeah, I'm going to let you ask some questions. Sorry,
it's fine.
I could talk about books and history and all that all day. So
I kind of want to stick with your writing. Do you find that playing Quark has influenced your writing at all, or writing characters, or writing anything relatable to Quark that you can kind of link back to getting from your time on Star Trek?
That's an interesting question, and I have two answers. The first is, for the present series of books, my Illyria books, the answer is no. There's nothing that Quark taught me about writing Illyria. Nothing whatsoever. However, I also did another trilogy prior to this, and that was very much influenced by Quark. Quark wasn't a character, but the leading character was, in a sense, based after the character of Quark. So I was called that trilogy sort of my introduction to writing, my finger exercises, and it was very helpful that I knew Quark's character well enough to put it into the character of John Dee, who, as Nick knows, is also the character in my earlier books.
And you brought Shakespeare into the new books, if I remember correctly, for Illyria.
That's correct. Yeah, Shakespeare is a 16-year-old boy.
Yep.
We don't know what happened to Shakespeare in 16, 17, 18 years old. We don't know how he became a great writer. One of the things I'm trying to deal with in my trilogy, my current trilogy, is how did that young boy from a small town in England become the world's greatest writer? How did that happen? And my books try to deal with that in some small way, although that's a secondary theme in the books.
So I'm taking a question again. I'm sorry, gentlemen. So I'm curious now about your writing process. So right now you're currently in the midst of making a new trilogy of books. Do you have a general outline of the entire series when you begin, or do you basically let your pen go to paper and let the words flow out from there?
The second, I let my imagination take over. I knew how it started and I knew how it ended. The question was how I got from one place to the other.
Okay.
And that was just creativity. And oftentimes, anyone who's creative knows this. You go off on a tangent, and that tangent takes you to new and wonderful places. And you start writing about that, and you're in a place you never imagined you would be.
Wonderful.
What's your writing process? Do you sit in a room? Do you like go to a Panera? What did you like your writing process?
I sit in a room, usually this room, and I have an idea for that day's work. I write it down, I refine it, I change it, I alter it, I erase it. I go back. It's like rehearsal. It's very much like rehearsal. In rehearsal, you start and you massage it and you massage it and you massage it, and you finally come up with something. And then every night in performance, it changes. So that usually in my writing, I've written something that I really like, and then I come back the next day and I'm still changing it because I can think it could be a little bit better. I'm a perfectionist. It's one of the reasons I rehearse during the weekends. And I want it to be perfect. It's one of the great things that bonded Renee and I together. We were both perfectionists, and we wanted it to be perfect. And we did all we could to make it, at least on our part, perfect.
My opinion, it was perfect too, because I love that show. I've loved it since I was little, and I still love that show.
Thank you. Thank you. We were very proud of it. We're still proud of it. And we're very proud of the writers and the directors that helped us achieve it. The actors are secondary artists. The primary artists are the writers. We take the words and we massage them and give them new insights, but we can't start without the writing. We have to have words first. And as much as I love the focus on the actors, you really should be talking to the writers because they're the original artists.
Yes.
And in fact, my writing career, the first trilogy, the first book was supposed to be an episode for Deep Space Nine.
Really?
And actually, not that trilogy. Another book. I have several books out, so sometimes I get confused. But the 34th Rule, which is a Star Trek book,
Right.
was supposed to be an episode.
Okay.
But the powers that be did not buy the idea for an episode, and so we transformed it into a novel.
Interesting.
And your first set of novels is Merchant Prince, right?
Merchant Prince, right?
It had a little bit of a sci-fi feel, didn't it?
Yes, it is a sci-fi, because it was an easy thing for me to do. I was a sci-fi actor. I had some cachet in that world. I knew that I was also a beginning writer. So how do I get my book published? I thought, well, the easy way to do that is to approach it through science fiction. And I knew something about science fiction, having always been a fan of science fiction. And so that was an easy route to take, and I took it.
So your new trilogy, Illyria, is that something that you had even the ideas you had even back then, or was that something that came along further after you were writing maybe a couple books and you realized you wanted to do something Shakespeare centric?
Well, I'll tell you, Joe. The man who started the Merchant Prince series with me, a wonderful writer named Michael Scott, he gave me the idea for Illyria back in 1990 something. I can't remember when. So, and that idea cogitated and percolated for a decade or so before I ever put pen to paper. Um, and but eventually I started to write, and as I said before, tangents just happened. I just went and started to write. I knew how it started, I knew how it ended, and how did I get there? It was never meant to be a trilogy. It was meant to be one book. However, when I sold Illyria to the publishers, they asked me, how many words do you have? And when I told them how many words I had, because I had been writing it for a long time, they said, no, you don't have one book, you have three books. So, and having three books causes not a problem, but a curve that you have to deal with, which is first two books needed to have cliffhangers in order to continue the writing. So having the cliffhangers, I had to create the cliffhanger and then try to pull the story back to where it originally was supposed to be, which I had to do with the second book, and I'm now dealing with in the third book.
And the second book is Sea of Troubles, right?
Sea of Troubles, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, the old adage, at least musically, is you have a lifetime to write your first record. You have 18 months to write your second.
I think that's a very good adage. And you know, the great thing is having deadlines are a wonderful thing for artists. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we would procrastinate until the cows came home. So having a deadline forces you to say, I got to do this. I got to do this now. I got to write this. Or I got to learn these lines. Or I got to set this music down. Or I got to paint this picture. Deadlines are wonderful for artists. Otherwise, we would never get anything done.
That's fascinating to me, because I would almost feel like deadlines would constrain you a little bit and force you to lose some creativity.
Yeah,
no, it forces your creativity to go into hyperdrive. It forces, yeah, that's why you may not be happy with the end result, because you think you could have done it better. But you probably would never have gotten it done at all if you didn't have the deadline.
That is sometimes true, right?
Yeah.
Now, I have a hypothetical question for you now, based off of what we were just talking about with your writing those science fiction works. So, really, science fiction as a genre didn't exist around the time of Shakespeare. That was more Jules Verne.
It did.
Sort of,
it did exist.
Okay. So what would Shakespeare say to science fiction as a genre?
He would write about it. Tempest is science fiction. Midsummer Night's Dream is science fiction. Titus Andronicus, to some extent, is science fiction. And that it did exist. It's just you just don't think about it in the same form, because you think of it as you know, the stars or magic or whatever. But yes, fantasy. They called it fantasy, and fantastical things were written. And certainly, what do you think the myths are back in the Roman and Greek times? That's science fiction.
See, Nick, you're thinking of it in the 20th and 21st century.
I am. I'm thinking in the wrong lens. I mean, gosh, that's what Armin just taught me earlier, and I've already messed it up.
You haven't even retained 40 minutes of information.
You were a Star Trek fan before Next Generation. I think I remember reading that.
Yes. I was a huge fan of the original show, and all of this happened. All of my connection with Star Trek happened because I was a huge fan. Mm-hmm. I will tell you a story that I've told several times before, but I'm happy to regurgitate it one more time. So I was doing a science fiction show called Beauty and the Beast with Ron Perlman and Linda Hamilton. And I got cast in my first episode of Star Trek, Next Generation. And it turned out, to make the story short, I got cast in Next Generation, but my agent called and said, Beauty and the Beast needs you the same day as Star Trek does. So you're going to have to turn down the Star Trek, because I was a recurring character on Beauty and the Beast. And I was a huge fan. And I said, I don't want to turn it down. And my agent said, you can't turn down your bread and butter for a one-day shot on Star Trek. I said, yeah, I can.
Watch me.
And we had a huge fight, but I was the client, and I won. And I did the wedding box in Next Generation.
I remember that episode. Did you watch Star Trek 6 by chance? I have a reason for asking this question. I know where I'm
very
going.
random.
Star Trek 6. I'm not familiar with Star
The
Trek 6.
Undiscovered Country.
Oh yeah, I did.
What do you think of the use of Shakespeare in that movie?
Yes, Christopher Plummer, who I did Henry V with.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Star Trek's always been a part of Star Trek, and I liked it. And Christopher Plummer, who just recently passed away, was one of the world's great Shakespearean actors, and it was a pleasure and an honor to work with him many years ago doing Henry V.
That's one of me and Nick's favorite Star Trek movie, and so the use of Shakespeare, I was kind of interested in your point of view, so that's why I asked.
Well, and Patrick Stewart would incorporate Shakespeare when he could. But really, all of us have classical theater background. All of us do, including the recurring characters. I'm not saying all of us, not all of the recurring characters, but almost all the series regulars all have classical background. At least in the shows that I'm familiar with. Some of the newer shows I'm not as familiar with.
I know Next Generation Deep Space Nine did. I don't know about Voyager and after that.
Voyager did as well. After that, my references get a little gray.
Mine too.
So you mentioned you were, I'm assuming you still are, a Star Trek fan. Do you watch any new Trek? Or
No, I don't want to pay for the Paramount Plus.
Oh my gosh. Amen. Preach.
Yeah.
I do pay for it,
You think
but
you'd
I'm
be
annoyed when I pay for it.
You think you'd be like grandfathered in where you get that for free with your history?
They don't. I know they have to do it. That's their revenue model. But I don't want to do it, and eventually I will get around to it. But I have seen all the movies and all the free TV. I know it sounds very Ferengi-like to not want to pay for Paramount.
We thought you were in character.
That's very.
But and the truth of the matter is, I've watched very little TV.
Yeah.
I'm caught up with a lot of other things, and when I do watch TV, it's usually I'm watching some streaming movie rather than a TV show. Although this is probably the golden era of TV, from what I've heard and what I've seen. Writing and production values in modern TV is astounding.
It very much is, and that's actually something that we found ourselves talking a lot about on our show. Is the 21st century era of television is certainly different than the 20th century era, where 20th century stories didn't tend to carry over between episodes. But Deep Space Nine did do that, and I think that's.
I believe we were one of the first. We certainly got into trouble for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, history proved us right, as you've just said.
Mm-hmm.
But Paramount was not happy about having episodes that bled over into another episode, into a third episode, into a fourth episode. They didn't like that, especially for a syndicated series, which we were. Syndication was about selling product to the syndicated channels, and the syndicates wanted their audience to tune in at any time and be able to appreciate an episode without having had to watch a previous episode or being forced to watch a future episode. So Paramount was always talking to the writers and the producers about not doing that sort of serial programming. But of course now all TV does that.
Right.
Yep.
But we were one of the pioneers of getting that particular format through.
Well, and
again, credit to our writers and our producers.
Certainly a credit because they fought for that series, especially when, especially in that era, Star Trek fans didn't love it in that era for some reason. They fought it, and now they look back at it and they're like, "What were we thinking? This was an incredible series."
Yeah, we boldly stayed in one place, which people didn't like.
Right.
And we didn't have a ship until I think season 3 or 4, the Defiant. We were about interpersonal relationships. That's what we were about, and we weren't necessarily, solving a world's problem in 44 minutes. We were about how people who don't like each other live together, and I think that's a theme that everyone can associate with.
It's unfortunately
Everybody has people at work that they're not crazy about.
Oh yeah, it's a universal truth.
In this room.
Hey,
yeah.
hey.
Yeah, and that's as an actor, as someone who had invested so much in that character, did you ever find it difficult when you would hear some of the feedback from people at that era who were saying this isn't real Star Trek and we're not happy with this? Like, did that ever get under your skin and bug you, or were you just so proud of your work you knew sooner or later they'd come around to it?
I was chagrined at the time because I knew we were doing good work.
Yeah.
I mean, I was watching the shows, I was watching the work up close and personal. I knew we were doing good work. I knew we had wonderful writers, and I knew we had wonderful actors and directors. And the lack of appreciation was galling, especially when we were right next door to Next Generation, which was being eulogized as though they were gods, and they were gods. I'm not putting them down,
Right.
but we were semi-gods, and we weren't getting any of that feedback. But I'm very happy now to see that people are rediscovering our show and saying that it's as good as it is. Nana and I often tell the story that in our fourth or fifth episode, when people weren't crazy about Deep Space Nine, I said to Nana, "Just wait, Nana. In a couple of decades, people will rediscover our show, and people will recognize what they're not recognizing now." She often quotes me and cites that came true.
Yeah, that was in the doc. I remember someone said that in the documentary.
Yeah,
And,
probably Nana. Probably
you
Nana.
called your shot, man, and that was pretty accurate.
It was good work. Good work will eventually come to the fore. Again, whether it's TV or whether it's painting, painters that are overlooked in their lifetimes. Later on, when their work is really, scrutinized, all of a sudden, those paintings go for millions of dollars.
To your point, that DS9 can still hold up. Joe is actually a Star Trek virgin overall, so we actually introduced him with Duet in season 1.
Great episode, Duet.
Yeah,
great
fantastic. And we hooked him, and that's why we're still here talking as a trio as opposed to a duo, which Nick and I originally started the show.
And that was kind of my genesis for the character actor question was Harris Yulin in that episode. He and Nana having I didn't really need anything else other than their interaction, and it carried the entire episode. I didn't know anything that happened prior to that or after. All I had was that episode in a vacuum, and it was riveting. And I've been hooked, and I'm on the show, and I'm deep diving into the world of Star Trek, specifically Deep Space Nine. And
thank you, Joe. That's an incredible episode. Harris Yulin is a phenomenal actor. Harris and I share a birthday. We both have the same birthday.
Yes,
early November, right?
No, November the 5th. Well, remember the 5th of November.
Belated happy birthday to you.
And also, Harris was in the room when I met my wife. So I've known Harris for a very long time. But he is an exceptional actor and an exceptional director, by the way, as well. But talking about actors and how good our casting process was, I think Nana probably told you that because she was working with Harris Yulin, who was an incredible actor, her game got better because she's a wonderful actress. Nothing against Nana, who I'm in awe of, but her game got better because she was working with Harris Yulin.
She spoke very highly of him. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, even just speaking with, going back to talking about what this character was viewed as then versus now, Nana specifically, the character of Kira was this strong woman who did not need to rely on anyone, right? Like, this was huge in terms of agency for women in the 90s when television wasn't writing women with this much agency, and her character just means so much, I think, to the world of Star Trek now because of that.
Well, her character was enormously strong, and it's a credit to Nana that she portrayed her with such strength and became a role model for a lot of women. It's one of those dream roles any actor would love to have, and she did great work with it. She was a force to reckon with on the stage. As I was talking about Harris bringing up Nana's game, my game would go up when I was working with Nana, but with all of them. And but Nana's character went through an enormous arc. And remember, she's a terrorist.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Kira Nerys is a terrorist who learns to to become part of the establishment.
Mhm.
And so it's a great arc that her character has. And not to mention, what she did in the opposite universe. That character is also stunning as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
So did playing Quark teach you anything about yourself? Because
Yes, a
we
great
spoke
deal.
we spoke with Nanan, and she was saying that playing Kira taught kind of opened her eyes to some things about herself, and vice versa. Did you bring anything to the character, and did the character give back anything to you?
I think the character gave me more to me than I gave to the character. What I learned from the character was how to be extroverted. Prior to playing Quark, I was very much an introvert. Um, Quark is not an introvert,
No.
and so I learned a great deal about that, about opening up. Um, Ironically, having all that rubber on my face and certainly around my ears, it made me a better listener because I had to listen, because
Necessity. Yeah.
I really had to listen.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't hear. So that was important. Um, I also think that what I learned from Quark was that you shouldn't read a book by its cover. Um, Quark, as a character, was on at first glance nefarious, uh, shady, not to be trusted, and therefore one would immediately think this is somebody I'm not going to like or not going to get behind. But I came to realize that along with those characteristics, and he certainly had them, there were other good characteristics as well. And you as an audience and I as a performer have to weigh the good with the bad. And depending on what episode, depending on where you are at, does the good outshine the bad, or does the bad outshine the good? And I'm always, it's why I asked you, what do you think of my character? A lot of people only see the initial appearance of Quark, which is that uh, he's a no good Nick. But I think over the course of 7 years, we see the arc for that character as well, and that he's capable of doing incredible things, and at the same time, following his own code of ethics, which may not be your code of ethics, but it was his code of ethics.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And you can't expect another society to have your code of ethics. You must learn what their code of ethics is and find a median path between yours and theirs.
Mhm. Mhm.
As a pastor, I'm sure you must do that.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely. And that actually reminds me, there was an episode very early in the series where you were having a conversation. Quark was having a conversation with the character of Cisco, and basically Quark calls out Cisco for being,
yes.
for holding up a mirror basically to humanity, saying you're not much better. Look, you're looking down upon us, but we aren't the people who did those terrible things. We didn't, we don't have slaves. We don't declare war against one another. You've done that, and it's just a really fascinating thing to put that in a perspective, right? Each of us has our own experiences. Each of us has our own understanding of the world, and so to put that mirror up and realize that we all have our differences, um, but we shouldn't be spending our time pointing fingers at another is a really important thing.
Thank you, Nick. You put that very well. That's excellent. I would totally agree with you, and I do remember several of those speeches.
Mm-hmm.
I had very few of them early on, but they did come in the middle and the end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would call those my Spock moments,
Mm-hmm.
because they had already done that with Spock
Mm-hmm.
when he would be talking to Bones, or he would be talking to the captain, and he would, look at humanity from a different prism and be able to point out their foibles. And because it was coming from Spock, he took it well.
Right.
This is why these kind of speeches came, I think, later in my Quark career, because you had to have an appreciation for Quark so that you could hear it,
Right.
and not just shrug it off coming from that, the little toad that ran the bar.
Mm-hmm.
I always appreciate Quark's insightfulness, because he always had that point of view where you could kind of relate to as a viewer, because he saw things for the way they were. And I know
Yes, he was a pragmatist, very much a pragmatist. He was the station, as the writers often said to me. You are the station. And he was welcoming to others, and yet he looked after himself and the station to the best of his ability. Granted, Starfleet was there to protect the station, but what really made the station run? Where did all those scenes take place when they needed to get together? They took place at Quark's, because that was the heart and soul of the station.
Well, and the heart and soul of the station in terms of the relationships, right? That's the show too, right? That's why it's at Quark's. That's why it's in the bar, because this is where they're having these deep, meaningful conversations. Or, Quark may be calling out Rom or something, but they're really important moments.
Yeah, these conversations that they don't necessarily advance the development like a storyline would, but they add context, and it creates a deeper vision of the character, a version of the character.
Precisely. They were dealing with heroic exercises, and yet what Rom and I and Nog and the other members of the bar were doing were commenting from the human point of view. What is going after the Cardassians do to us individuals? How does it affect our lives? What is, what's happening in Washington or in court cases around the country? Those are important things. But how does it affect the individual? And that's what we were. We were the individuals that this was sort of seeping down to. And how do individuals face these large exploits? We were the humans.
Yeah, you were.
Yes.
We were the humans. They I always said Quark was the most human character on the show. The other people, it's hard to believe. It's a suicide mission. Everybody raises their hand, except for me, because they were superhuman. They were not in a Marvel way, but they weren't really humans. They were ideals. They were humans. They had human characteristics, and the actors and the writers gave them great human characteristics. But certainly they were idealistic.
Oh, absolutely,
yes.
Whereas my character was pragmatic, and didn't have those rich traits of heroism, because we were human. We were regular Joes.
Now, we all know that we all know you best for Quark, and I would assume that you probably enjoyed playing that role the most throughout your live action acting career. But beyond that role, is there another role that you had, whether it's in Buffy or Beauty and the Beast or Boston Legal or some of the other one-off roles, where you look back and you really appreciate that you had the opportunity to play that role or that character?
Yes, they're all my children. I liked all of them, and all of them have good points about them. Because I am basically not a TV actor, but a theater actor, I would rather point to the theater performances that I have done, where I got to spend a lot of time crafting the performance and learning about the reaction with the audience as well. But as far as my TV roles, they were all special to me when I was doing them, and they're special to me in remembering them as well. Ironically, it's not just the theater and the TV roles. Some of my voiceover acting roles,
Yes.
I'm very proud of as well. When you were asking that question, the character that came to mind immediately was Andrew Rhines from the game BioShock.
Yep.
And I'm extremely proud that I got to do that, and very happy with what we collaborated on and ended up with.
A very good story on that.
Yeah, I'm very proud. Look, the writing there was very Shakespearean. It played to all my fortes, and we got to craft it, because it wasn't just say it once, let's print it and move on. We came back many times and crafted those speeches so that they got better and better and better.
Is the approach
And
to
speeches
voice?
would change. I would do something, and the writers would say, "Oh," and they would come back 2 weeks later and say, "We've changed some of the language. We want you to say this because of something that you did." And so that was a really great experience. So I will also include my voiceover career for the things that I've done as
Absolutely.
well.
That was my next. That was what I was leading to, was your voiceover work. Because you've said before that you didn't really get much say in your role as Quark. I mean, the
Right.
writers wrote it, and they wanted you to portray it as they wrote it, almost to the T.
Absolutely. If we didn't get it exactly right, every word exactly right, and because at the end of every take, all of us would turn to Judy Brown, the script coordinator, and if she didn't say DLP, Lovey, then we knew we had another take because we had to do it again. DLP, dead letter perfect. And we had to do it. The other shows might not have had that criteria. I know Next Generation didn't. I'm not sure about Voyager, but we had to be DLP. And although I didn't have much verbal input into my character, I am quite sure that the writers watching dailies would see things that I would do and learn from them and incorporate them into future scripts.
You had your subliminal input through.
Right. I mean, I'm quite sure Nana probably told you about how she and Renee's romance happened on the show because Renee happened to look at Nana one way during dailies, and they had an inspiration to put the two of them together.
So juxtaposing that to your voiceover work, where maybe you do get a little more say in kind of how you.
No say whatsoever. What I do again is choice. When I do my voiceover work, for the most part, they give me a line. It's really, you go line by line by line. And I normally will do a line 3 different ways, depending on what kicks in, what my creativity suggests at that moment. And then they will choose which of the 3 takes they want. If they don't like any of the 3 takes, then I have to do it another 3 times. But usually it's one of the 3 original takes that they want. So the creativity comes in. I've heard myself say it one way the first time, and then I differ slightly on the second one. And because I've done it now twice, the third one seems to be the most creative because I'm incorporating everything I've learned from doing it the first 2 times. Again, this is the nuts and bolts of rehearsal.
Yeah. So do you take inspiration individually for each role, or is there a little bit of each one? Is there some sort of common ground within your voice acting parameter, like spectrum?
It depends on the role. If the role is expansive enough so that I can think about it. Here's another problem. Usually, when I go in for voiceover work, I haven't seen the script until the moment I put the earphones on. So I don't know what's coming. Now there are voiceover projects that I've done now for multiple years now. BioShock was one of them. I did 3 BioShocks, or Ratchet and Clank, which I think I did about 15 of those. So I know those characters, and I can have some ideas about that. But some of the other work, I put the earphones on, and there I am. And so it's catch as catch can. It's whatever inspires me at the moment. And usually it's something that I'm taking from what language I see in front of me, and to whatever how that chimes in me, and how my being, my existence, my life pushes me to say that line.
So does that become a freeing thing in those moments where you put on the headphones for the first time and you're looking at that script, or is that almost an anxious moment?
It's anxious for the first take.
Okay.
Because I don't know, and unless you have time, and you rarely do, you don't know where this is going.
Right.
You know where it came from because you had the line before, but you have no idea where it's going. And normally they don't tell you where it's going. So it is an anxious moment, especially for a perfectionist.
Yeah.
It It is the worst kind of acting. It's like improv. I have no idea where I'm going. Um, but after I've done it the second and third time, then I have a better grasp of it. And sometimes it doesn't happen often, but rarely they'll go, "Oh, that's great, thank you very much," and I'll say, "Excuse me, can I do one more? Because I have a new idea, and I want to try the new idea." And I would say half the time they'd say, "Oh, thank you for doing it one more time because we were happy with what you gave us, but that's so much better." So it is anxious making, but like deadlines, anxiousness for an actor is often a very good thing. Sometimes your best performance is opening night when all the nerves are at play because it puts you in a new place and gives you an energy that you never knew you had, as opposed to closing night when you've done it 100 times and it's just a laundry list for you. And although you're doing your best job, it's not as exciting as that opening night.
Right.
So I think I know the answer to this, but I want to ask anyway. Do you find that the theater experience is more rewarding than the
Exponentially.
exponentially?
Exponentially.
Is it the
Uh,
immediacy of having the audience there?
it's not so much the audience, although the audience helps.
Yeah.
It's the ability to craft a performance, to sculpt a performance. TV is about lucking into a performance. You bring what you can, but as I said, you have a half hour, and whatever happens, you meet the actors. Sometimes you're meeting the actors for the first time, and this is your girlfriend, this is your mother, this is your long lost brother, and you've never met that actor before.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have to create a world in a half hour that people will believe. But in the theater, you get anywhere from a month to 6 months to craft, to shape, to mold, to make choices and throw them out, find new choices and stick with them, let them take you somewhere else. That is a sculpture that you can be proud of. And then the audience, which is the final character you meet in a play, the audience will tip you one way or another from evening to evening. And you have to be, although they're there, and you're trying not to let them influence, your performance. They are influencing your performance, and sometimes for the better, sometimes not for the better, but sometimes for most of the time for the better. When it's not for the better is when they're laughing all the time, and you start playing for the laughs, as opposed to honing the line that is your performance.
So yeah, that was my next sort of point to that question is are you then on stage, are you taking mental notes as the performance is going on, kind of noting like this worked, this didn't, and do you, from performance to performance, how much do you go back to those notes and let them kind of influence the next performance and the next one in the week after week?
That is an excellent question, Joe. Um, you do take notes. It's an amazing situation. You're in the middle of having an argument with someone on stage, and you believe you're having an argument. You really are. But there's also a little voice or a little eye, third eye, right over your head, watching not so much what you're doing, but how it's influencing the audience. And you remember, oh, I did that at that moment, and that seemed to get a response. Not necessarily a laugh. It could be anything. It could be a better than a laugh is a hush. When you can hear a pin drop, that's the best thing. And when I did that, that hush came upon me. So you are watching, and yet you're in it at the same time. And it's a strange place. And then the very best situation is when the third eye disappears and you're so involved in what you're doing that you have no reference to time, to the audience, to anything. All you know is it's 11 o'clock and you had an experience and you can't recreate it, but you were so totally involved that that's the drug that most actors are usually introduced to the theater about. It doesn't happen so much in TV and film.
No,
I wish I
talk about
yes, I
that.
wish I knew the word that Nana used, but she described that exact experience and that exact that she I want to say she called it like the zone, but it was something like that where
Zone.
she called it like an out of body experience where you're there doing it, but at the same time it's almost like it's not you, it's somebody else. It's like
now, yes.
you've kind of been possessed or taken over, and it's like the next level of being a really in character actor. She spoke exactly like that as well.
It is that you are taken over by your character and by the situation, and and you become someone else. And again, that ability to get out of yourself, to get out of your physical being, to get out of your mind, to get out of your life for 3 hours, and to become someone else is a drug. It's and I'm sure Nina said it much better than I will. It is devoutly to be wished.
Yes, she said that's what an actor or actress attains to have, to live in that moment, that zone.
So you have 3 hours, give and take, you're on and off stage, which is so much more satisfying than a 5, 6, 7 minute take. So
Yeah,
that
makes
answers
sense.
your question. That's why I much prefer the theater over TV. TV is lovely, and you can find those brief moments,
Yep.
absolutely, but they aren't as satisfying as being on stage for 20 minutes, half hour longer, and having that reaction happen to you.
It's good.
You got anything?
Oh yeah, I got. So
I feel like
I know
I
we're
feel
coming
like
up.
Nick talked for a while. I talked for a while.
I talk the least on the show. So one of the things that we like to ask everybody who comes on our show, two-part question.
Our most serious question.
It's our most serious question. Do you like pizza?
Yes.
What is your favorite kind of pizza? Whether it be something you can make yourself, whether it be a restaurant, what is your go-to pizza?
My favorite thing that when we ask this question is, we have a discussion, and then as soon as we ask about pizza, everybody's face lights up. Everyone, you mentioned pizza, and everyone just smiles.
just smile.
Because you have a memory of the pizza that you like the
Yes.
best, and it comes
That is
flooding
very
back
true.
to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something that you'll be happy with the answer, but I can't explain it any more than this. My favorite pizza is Bob Picardo's pizza.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Bob Picardo, who had his own pizza oven, made the best pizza in the world.
So
And
Just got a doctorate.
for Joe, who doesn't know, looks like he doesn't know who Bob Picardo
No
is.
clue.
No.
Okay, he is
But
the doctor on Voyager.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I do know that the
medical
answer.
hologram.
I do know that the answer is now. This is the third time. So this is the second time we've gotten this answer where it's somebody making pizza for the person.
Yep.
Not a specific type of pizza where you go out and get it.
No, yeah, Bob's pizza is head and shoulders above anything I've had. He's just an
What-
incredible pizza maker because it's all fresh. It's done in front of you. It's shared with friends. Everything about it is exquisite.
Pizza should be shared amongst.
I think that's why
friends.
pizza is so good is because it's a communal dish where you can just share it together, and you're usually some kind of event or some kind of party, and here we are.
Yeah, there's conversations. It's not just you're eating. It's you're eating a slice of pizza and you're having a conversation with a friend, or maybe you're meeting somebody for the first time, and it's just this. It's the great uniter. Pizza is the great uniter.
Exactly, and when Bob makes it, he's making it for friends, so you can feel the love in the pizza. That's trite, but it's true.
No, makes sense to me.
Right. Well, and then this goes back to what you were just saying. It's part of the experience is part of it as well, right? What makes that pizza so good with Bob is also you're with Bob and you're with all your friends eating that together.
Right.
Pizza's great.
Because I never have pizza with Bob unless all my friends are, not all of them, but some of my friends. It's always, as you said, it's a communal experience, and one that lives vividly. But the taste is also. You have to give it to Bob. It's a great pizza maker. He's great.
Kudos where kudos due.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask a question because I think this is, to me, it's one of the most unique lines in your storied career. You've been on Buffy, you've been on Star Trek and Beauty and the Beast, and you've had a long.
I believe I've done 206 TV shows,
Whew. And
or at least 206. That includes the games, I think. But at least between games and films and TV shows, 206, and probably about 80 plays.
Oh, goodness.
And I think at least your your on-screen acting career, most of those have been either like science fiction or sort of dramatic roles, serious roles. But you played Stan the Caddy on Seinfeld, which is a comedic role, which isn't necessarily something. When I think of Armin Shimerman, I don't necessarily think comedic role. How
Really? What do you don't think Quark is comedic?
Yeah, I mean, what, I'm walking away right now because this is not. Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No.
Interrupt away.
No. When I'm wrong, I like to be pointed out immediately, so that way I can stop and kind of.
See, this is the new Armin. The old Armin before Quark would never have interrupted. Go ahead.
See, the character has shown you some things about yourself. But how different was it being on a comedic show that's seen as a comedic show versus, I know Quark is a comedic character, but it wasn't necessarily a comedic show. Is there a different approach, or do you have anything that you took away from that role?
Yes. Okay. Sit back. All right.
Oh boy.
Okay.
You happen to have picked one of my least favorite experiences.
Really?
Okay.
I hated being on Seinfeld.
Hate
Really?
it.
Wow.
Hate it. Okay.
Hated it because they were all asses.
No, that's.
They were all. Whereas I told you before how good actors make your game better, and what I didn't tell you about is one of the things that made the actors on our show better was that all of the series regulars, all the recurring characters, were welcoming to all the new people. It's how we made them feel comfortable in a strange world.
Yeah.
Right.
The Seinfeld people were ugly. They didn't say anything bad. They just never once tried to bring me into their group. Not that an equal. No, I know what a guest star is. But they never said good morning. They never talked to me. Except when, we were shooting something. Then they never asked me about myself. And at that time, I was doing Deep Space Nine, and I knew what the ethos was on our show. I was very much part of that ethos.
Yeah.
I knew what it was like to be a guest star, and I knew how hard it is, and I knew that that it was just your responsibility to make people feel comfortable on your show. These people went out of their way to make me feel not comfortable.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, what's it like to do a comedic show? And I have done other comedic shows, but it wasn't pleasant.
Wow. How hard was it to act in that atmosphere?
It was difficult.
Yeah.
It was difficult.
Do you think it seeped into your screen time? Do you think
I hope it didn't. I hope I'm a good enough actor that I didn't let any of that show.
I thought it was great, but now knowing the backstory, I kind of want to go back and rewatch it. I want to see it.
I hope you. I mean, there's no way for you to see. It's not that they did anything. It's the opposite.
Right.
They didn't do anything.
That's the problem.
That's the
right.
thing.
That was the problem. I could have been the bleacher that we all sat on, as far as they were concerned. And in fact, I shouldn't tell this story, so I won't. Maybe when we're not filming, I'll tell you the story. But it was not pleasant.
Yeah.
And ironically, a lot of times people ask me about my time on Seinfeld, and I always give the same response. They were less than welcoming. And what's strange, yeah. Okay, so end of answer.
I will say I appreciate your honesty because
Yeah,
it would be very easy to just say, you know what, it went well, and then move on from that. But then you wouldn't be being an authentic person. So I appreciate that honesty and that authenticity on your part.
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah. So again, you've reprised Quark for a number of roles since DS9 has ended.
No,
Like voice, you've done the voice.
Video game
I've
stuff.
done the voice. Yes, reprise usually means yes, yes. I've done the voice.
In a matter of speaking.
Come on.
Yes,
Joe.
yes.
I apologize.
I've never put the makeup back on, but I have done the voice. Yes.
Would you like to put it back on for if
Yes, I
further
would.
down the road?
Yes, I would. Patrick, at the beginning of Picard, when they were first getting it together, um, didn't recommend or promise or anything like that, but did say that that he'd hoped that there might be a place for Quark on at least a guest star appearance.
We hope
And I
so,
would
too.
like to do that. I would not. Um, I would not like to be a series regular as Quark again. That experience was wonderful, magical, uh, creative, but very hard physically, very hard physically. And I'm not as young as I used to be.
Right.
Well,
And
the makeup and prosthetics help with that.
the makeup was part of it. The amount of time. I'm sure Nana probably told you how long our days were. For her, I would imagine a long day was 15 hours, which means that my days were 18 hours. Um, and they were taxing. So I wouldn't want to be a series regular as Quark again. But if I were to come back as a recurring character on some Star Trek show, I could do that. I could do that.
I know you've gotten to see some of your friends and some of the cast from DS9 and like at like Comic Cons and events and things like that. But and I know that it would be difficult, I think, for everybody because you'd be missing Renee. But would the cast be open to something where it's maybe a one-off ensemble, kind of either flash forward or revisiting those characters as an ensemble? Because to me, watching the show, I do love each character individually for its very specific reasons, but to me, the ensemble nature of the cast is where it really shines when everybody's kind of playing off one another. And I know it's been decades since you've done that together, so maybe there's a little bit of rust to be knocked off, but I feel like maybe there is one more story to be told with those characters, or do you
Well,
think that?
lucky for you, I'm going to give you a Christmas present. Um, Sid
Mhm.
put together a project. Write this down. Do you know about this, Rob?
I do know about this.
Yeah. It's
The first
called
word,
Sid
man.
City. And I'm surprised Nana didn't tell you about it. It's called Sid City. And the ensemble, those of us who are still around, get together and we do our characters as a radio show. And you can find it on YouTube.
Okay.
And we've done
This is blowing
2
my mind.
seasons. It's not just one episode. We've done, I believe, I wasn't there at the beginning. Sid was, Andy Robinson was there. Later on, I was introduced, and Nana was introduced. Sirach was introduced. Who else? Nana and Sid's son was there as well. There probably are 1 or 2 others that I'm forgetting. Terry came on a little bit later. And we recreated our characters. And so there's fun in listening to us. I'm certainly not in makeup. Neither is Terry doesn't have any dots. So there's that. I imagine because of that, because we were all willing to do that, that if they were to give us another venue, yes, of course we would do that. And there is no rust because we see each other.
Well, yeah.
We see each other often enough, not frequently, but often enough, either at conventions or somebody throws a party and we're all there together,
Yeah.
or through Zoom, like I just explained to you, described to you.
I imagine that would keep you pretty fresh, or at least
It
fresh
is.
enough where if they said we would like to do this, there's no, there's really no lag.
No, there's no lag. And it is for me. There's a tiny bit of lag. I have to get used to the teeth again. Although I've got braces on now, but I'd have to get used to the teeth again. And but I think we could all do it. We would be a little older, a little wiser, a little bit more circumspect, perhaps, but also perhaps a little bit more creative because we've had a quarter of a century to think about our roles.
You know,
Um,
well, one of the things that I find so endearing about Deep Space Nine, especially watching it now, is realizing the relationships you all have together in this time frame, right? Like the relationships that have formed after the show has ended, knowing the relationships like Terry and Nana are extremely close, right? Like knowing that they're close, or knowing that you get together for pizza together and you have these times together. That makes me love the show that much more because there's part of me when I go back and rewatch the original series now and I realize some of the commotion that was going on behind scenes, it makes it a little bit harder to watch, knowing that these characters really didn't care for each other at that time.
some of them indeed did not like each other. The relationship between Quark and Odo came out of the real relationship between Renee and I.
Mm-hmm.
Our friendship blossomed during the show and became very rich, deep, meaningful. The writers saw that in the dailies, and as I said earlier, they worked upon that. And Renee and I were more than happy to play into that because long before the other actors were bonding, and we were all bonding, but the rich bond that you were just talking about, like Terry's and Nana's right now, that had happened to Renee and I, and our writers used to roll their eyes in surprise that Renee and I would often take vacations together.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you're spending 18 hours a day together, and you're like, okay, let's go on
Bickering,
vacation now.
18 hours a day bickering.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let's go on vacation and not do that for a little bit. That'd be
We
great.
still bickered on vacation, but we had a good time. We always had a good time doing it.
Yeah.
It does add value to the show because for me, when Deep Space Nine aired, I was younger, and towards the end of your run, I had something in my life that happened to me, and watching that show in particular, I caught The Visitor on rerun, and I had just lost a friend that basically helped shape who I was. And so Deep Space Nine, catching The Visitor on a rerun at the same time I was going through all this, Deep Space Nine, it reaches to me. It still speaks to me. It's still something that I endear because of those memories and something that I needed at the time.
Again, kudos to our writers. And again, kudos to the fact that we were about relationships.
Absolutely.
It's not about saving worlds.
And
We were about relationships. And the next time you see The Visitor, the girl who comes to interview is Andy Robinson's daughter. So
He's our next
Garrett.
guy. Joe here has a little bit of an obsession with Garrick. It's his favorite character by far.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't? Good taste, Joe.
Yeah,
Good taste.
yeah.
but in all fairness to Joe, he went as Quark for Halloween.
I did go as Quark for Halloween.
He did go as Quark for Halloween, but he had the cheap like $9.99 mask back in the day.
Yeah, it wasn't a good mask. Retrospectively, I wish I would have forked over the dough for something that may have been a little more screen accurate.
I'm quite sure you wouldn't have liked it after about an hour.
Yeah.
Well, I tell
They're
you
very
what,
claustrophobic. They cause you not to go deaf, but you are deaf when you're wearing the Ferengi
I've
makeup.
got 3 kids, so I'm fine with that.
It might be a good thing, yes.
Might be a good thing.
I'm flattered that you chose a Ferengi to go to be your avatar for Halloween.
His thrift store Quark outfit that he put together, spot on too.
Good.
Everything but the mask. The mask was a train wreck.
The costume designer always said that his favorite actor or favorite character to design for was Quark because the costumes that he created from my character were just delicious.
Oh, they're lavish. They're beautiful. I want
Heavy,
to wear like that.
heavy and hot, but
So they
beautiful.
look heavy.
Oh, they are. They were heavy.
Wool.
Yeah, a lot of wool. A lot of couches died so that I could wear those that material.
A lot of grandmothers' empty living rooms with making his outfits.
Yeah, there you go. That's true. That's true.
And one thing we want to ask about was your charity.
Yeah.
PanCan. What can you tell us
Thank
about
you.
that?
So, this is a sad story that ends with an incredibly happy ending. When I was doing Deep Space Nine, my wife, Kitty, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. That was 17 years ago. And at that time, it was a death sentence for pretty much everybody who got it. I believe at that time the statistics were 4% survival rate for pancreatic cancer. It is now 10%. It's not much better. My wife survived, and it's a miracle, and I'm grateful. And I can't imagine the other scenario. But unfortunately, too many people have experienced the other scenario, including Jonathan Frakes' brother. And PanCam came to Kitty. They had met her because she had mentored a very wonderful lady who was a very famous TV actress. Oh my God, I've just forgotten her name. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is really terrible. This is old. This is old age. Anyway, so they had met Kitty through this character actress. And when that actress passed away, not from pancreatic cancer, because she too survived, they contacted her to see if Kitty would speak at PanCan conventions. And they liked what Kitty had to say, and they asked her to. They asked both of us actually, but primarily Kitty, to lead a PanCan campaign to raise money for pancreatic cancer. She knew of Jonathan Frakes' relationship to pancreatic cancer, and she asked if Johnny could join us as well, and he immediately said yes. And so the three of us, for about 6 months, did our best to raise money for PanCan. PanCan is an extraordinary organization that is raising awareness for pancreatic cancer, helping to find cures for pancreatic cancer, and helping people find doctors who need doctors for pancreatic cancer, looking for new treatments. It is an extraordinary group of people doing extraordinary things. Our particular crusade ended a couple of months ago, but Kitty and I are still involved with PanCan and will continue to be so, I'm sure, for the rest of our lives. And I'm sure Johnny will as well.
Yeah, I would imagine that regardless of your involvement with specific projects, it's something that's very personal and very near and dear.
Very personal and very meaningful, and it's our way of giving back. We are extraordinarily lucky. Mm-hmm. We are extraordinarily lucky. Mm-hmm. And what my wife does on a personal basis, if anyone is diagnosed with that disease, or in fact any kind of cancer, people know to say to that person, give my friend Kitty Swink or Armin Shimerman a call. They can perhaps help you get through this one way or another. We can't help you to take medicines, but we can maybe put your mind in a helpful place. Certainly, we are pastors to the people who come down with the disease.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That emotional healing that can be provided by knowing that you're not alone is important as well. Just as almost, I wouldn't say just as important, but it's very important compared to the healing that a doctor can provide.
And if I may add to that, that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. But if I may add to it, the fact that my wife survived because when people first hear that they've got this disease, mm-hmm. they think the worst. Yes. Because that's what we know about this disease. It's a 10% at this point survival rate. So the fact that someone survived, someone has lived 17 years without having to go back to the hospital for this, is a great sop for people to hang on to and hope for. Yes. It can be done. It does happen. You can be one of those people. Kitty's oncologist said to her when she was first diagnosed, he told me, don't go online and find out what the survival rate is. And it took me 3 years to get up the nerve to do that. Mm-hmm. But he said, you're not a number. You're a person, and I will treat you as a person and not as a number.
That's a wonderful doctor.
Yes,
That's a
that's a
wonderful
great doctor.
Yes.
And that too was happening while I was doing Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, man, that, you had a lot going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had one final question for you. And this goes back to the very beginning of our conversation when we were talking about Shakespeare.
More pizza?
More pizza, no. If I was a random person on the street who had never experienced Shakespeare, didn't know anything about Shakespeare, and you had to recommend one play of his to sit down and watch, to experience who Shakespeare was, and only one, what would it be?
Well, the obvious choice is Hamlet, but I'm not going to say Hamlet.
Of course not.
I would say Twelfth Night.
Twelfth Night.
My dogs are disagreeing, but Twelfth Night because it's a comedy. It's incredibly well written. It has to deal with human values. It's on a human scale. And it's a delightful piece of work. And my 2 novels are based on Twelfth Night. So
there you go.
You gotta get that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Get
Perfect.
that. Yeah.
Well, we just want to say thank you again for coming on.
Thank you very much.
And spending so much time with us. It was very kind of you, and I can't say how much we appreciate that.
thank you. It's very kind. You guys are terrific. Thank you for your questions and your understanding. This was a lot of fun to do.
Good.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
enjoyed every syllable of this
Yeah.
conversation.
I enjoyed every syllable that I could pronounce. Yes, yes.
Well, you did well on Illyria, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And if I may, I don't, but again, here's the book.
By all means.
Yeah.
It's Illyria. This is the first book, Betrayal of Angels.
Mhm.
This is the second one.
Soon to be released, right?
Is released.
Oh, it
released.
is. When did it come out?
On November the 5th. A Sea of Troubles.
Okay.
They're both Illyria. And you can get them at Amazon.com, or you can go to my website, ArminShimerman.com,
Okay.
and you can buy them through that, and they will send you to my publisher, and you'll buy them from the publisher. And should anyone be interested in the many things that I have done, my website includes all of that information. So I have been very fortunate in my career. I am not by any means a celebrity, but I am a working actor who did well.
Well, as a working actor who did well, we appreciate your
Absolutely.
time. So thank you.
Yes. You're a celebrity in a lot of people's minds.
Yes,
You
exactly.
are a celebrity, including ours.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
But thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it very much. And
Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was fun.
That was fun.
That was enlightening.
It was
He talked
enlightening,
to
yeah.
us for such a long time too. I really appreciate about that. Like right at the beginning when he's like, "Hey," we're like, "We're really appreciative of your time." And he's like, "Oh, don't even worry about it. If it goes over an hour, it goes over an hour." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay."
And
He
was
seems to like to go against the advice of his publicists or agents, right? Like he just seems to get advice from them and go, I'm not doing that.
But
I love when he said, "I'm the client, so I was right."
Yeah.
But you know what's so fitting about this is, some of the stories he's told us, it's about treating people with respect and treating people with the humanity that they are imbued in, right? And that's what he did for us. We're not just fans. We're human. We're humans, and he respected us and gave us his time.
Humans. I wanted to say that. But so this is the second Deep Space Nine actor or actress we've had on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one was Nana Visitor.
No.
She was the first person that we interviewed from the show. So there's, you have these nerves. And she told the story about Chance the fucking Rapper.
Mm-hmm.
Or she had that moment.
Yeah.
Which kind of eased at least for me, it kind of eased the
Oh,
nerves.
definitely.
And I will say this.
Us.
I was slightly intimidated going into this because of how scholastic he is. How,
Yes.
Absolutely.
And he's not just smart and he's a professor. It's Shakespeare. It's like, it's the
Big time.
upper echelon of
Yes.
So when he started the interview and he just kind of said that if we wanted a little more time, he would give us a little more time.
Yeah.
Just that act of humanity kind of put me at ease again.
Absolutely. It was
So
wonderful.
I just want to thank him for being so generous with his time.
Thank you, Armin. And we're going to make sure we include all the links to his website and our show description.
Where you can get his books.
We'll find a way to put that in the YouTube video. Sorry, Rob, you're going to have to do that.
I can do that.
And we'll make it happen. So,
How you gonna do it?
What?
How you gonna do it on the YouTube video? I got it all right here.
There we go.
I'll write it on this paper and then I'll show it on the YouTube and then you can just click the paper.
There we go. Done. Easy, simple. Anything else, gentlemen?
I got nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Well, I think it's time to get out of here, but we can't get out of here just yet because we have something we need to do first.
Yes, we need to thank our Patreon subscribers, Hillary and Annette. They've released or they've received their first 2 bonus episodes.
Interactive bonus episodes,
which have been very well received.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, I think the 3 of us really enjoyed doing those.
Yes,
I really do.
To kind of step away from the Star Trek stuff and the pop culture stuff and get a little personal without everybody being involved in it.
Yep.
So if you want to, these more get to know your host kind of things, I think are where we might go with some of the Patreon stuff, which I think I would love. I would love it.
I like it.
And based on the reactions from our patrons, I think they enjoy it as well. So if that's something you would like to be a part of, you can go to patreon.com/keeping up with the Cardassians and sign up for the $5 or $10 tier.
Yep.
There's also a $2 tier, which will get you a love note from us.
Which
and
we love to
signed.
write.
I won't write it because you won't be able to read it.
Well, I'll write it. I'll make it
He has
real romantic.
excellent penmanship.
Yep.
Penmanship.
It can be, depending on. It can start out real nice, and then by the end, it's like.
I think it's wonderful.
Side note, real quick, what about that imitations from the Monk podcast?
Yeah. So
shots fired.
Yeah. So as of the recording of this, we haven't heard their response, but I feel like we've got an East Coast West Coast beef thing going.
And I'm enjoying
and,
it. It's North versus South is really.
It totally
what
it
but
is.
How did it work out for the South the first time?
Yeah. How's it gonna work out for the month?
Hey, you know what? You know what they love? People in Florida love when you call them Southerners. Because they really don't consider themselves Southerners.
Oh, they're such Southerners.
I know, but they don't consider themselves Southerners, which
they would have been part of the Confederacy.
I know.
So there's
dang.
Sorry. All right. Anyways,
say the
where can you find
podcast
us,
is part of the Confederacy?
Where can you find
taking it up a notch?
Oh my gosh, that's rough.
So
at Instagram, keeping _up_ Cardassian.
Twitter at Cardassians Pod. Facebook, Keeping Up with the Cardassians. YouTube, Keeping Up with the Cardassians. Anywhere else? Anywhere you
Good
can.
Pods.
Good Pods.
your favorite podcast network?
Yes.
What? They have.
Yeah, they do.
Go there.
Yeah, they do. Good Pods.
Good Pods.
Good Pods.
Good Pods.
It's been a blast. We hope you enjoyed this interview as much as we did. Have a great night. We love you all. Peace.
Another winter ends, so let the spring begin. Pick up a pen when inspiration hits again. And do we suffer for the art or because of it? Well, either way, my whole crew is on some other shit. Bases loaded in the bottom of the ninth. Entire place is loaded out for bottles and the pints. We rocking it tonight, tomorrow and on and on. Get your radio active for this atomic bomb. Boom, we respond when called upon. Rage like corn in the wrath of minds are born. Bust moves, crush grooves like Shaka Khan. Fast like Ramadan, out on the
Man, it's a
Autobahn.
strange world. Let's keep it that way. Peep what they say with the beats on display. Season the day, a needle and hay. The sharp prick you can't see, making you antsy like a sharp with candy. Damn, see, man plans and God laughs. So I make art filled with hot flows like someone who draws bass. Ah, snap, the burner is back. Permanent fat, you learning the rap like I'm Jermaine Dupri and turning the brat. You wondering what's going on under burglar's hat. I'm just a stranger with stir fry, letting the word fly with Riddler, homeless in the shed. Peace to the world, guy.
Take a ride.